Morning, everyone. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce Rick Perry, Secretary of Energy. Secretary Perry grew up in the West Texas community of Paint Creek, a very small community in West Texas. Growing up, he was an Eagle Scout. He was the first in his family to attend college, received his degree in animal science from Texas A&M University, served our country as a pilot in the Air Force flying C-130 tactical airlift aircraft in Europe and the Middle East. He continued his service to the country as Texas Commissioner of Agriculture for 2 terms, Texas House of Representative for 3 terms, and as the 47th governor of Texas, the longest standing governor in Texas history. Rick Perry is currently the 14th United States Secretary of Energy. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Perry.
Adam, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back in Iowa. I was just sharing with some of the folks that we had an earlier opportunity to visit with that I know more about Iowa than I ever thought I would know before, having come here in 2011, 2012, and running for president, and then I think again another iteration of that 4 years later. So anyway, this is a really fascinating community and a unique lab in the sense of you're co-located with a university, which makes you different than any of our other 17 labs. And next week I will get my gold star of having gone to all 17 labs when I go to Brookhaven next week. So you all were on the list for a pretty good spell. And so there's this little bit of deja vu for me to come to Ames and to Iowa State. 50 years ago in August, I started my college career and what I expected to be the track that I was on to be a veterinarian. That was my goal in life. I knew exactly where I wanted to go to college. I knew exactly what I wanted to study and to be a veterinarian. And then organic chemistry changed my life forever. How many? Yeah, I know. There's some of you in here that are doing something different in your life because organic chemistry had the same effect on your life, right? Yeah. It's really funny. I went to see the dean of the veterinary school after my sophomore year, and he just calls me in, and Dr. A. Price was his name, and Dr. Price didn't know me from Adam. He's looking at my records, and he just kind of looks up at me. He says, "James, you don't really want to be," James is my given name, "James, you don't really want to be a veterinarian, do you?" And oh, yes, Dean Price, it's all I ever wanted to be. And I went through my cock and bull story about, working for the veterinarian every summer and all this, that, and the other. He says, "Son, I'm looking at your resume. You don't want to be a veterinarian." And so anyway, that was kind of the illustrious end of my veterinary life, and went on to do something else. And so the point of that story is not only to humanize it a little bit, but to say that failure is okay. And I use the term delicately, and sometimes I get a little bit criticized for using the term throwing jello at the wall. It's not a highly technical scientific term. But the point of what you all do and basic research and being able to test theories, because if we don't do that, then we may never find some glorious change and way to improve people's lives. And that's the most exciting thing about my current job. I tell people, I said, being the governor of Texas is the greatest job I ever had. And will be, no matter what I get to do in life. And I'm thinking I'm pretty much getting close to the end. I spent from 2000 to 2015 being the governor of Texas, and then I decided it was time to retire. And I totally failed retirement. And so I'm incredibly happy that the president asked me to come and to participate in the role that I get to play in this administration. It's obviously a really fascinating time to be in public service, and to some days I throw javelins, some days I catch javelins. But the point is, this job is by far the coolest job I've ever had. And I've lived this blessed life of getting to go and do a lot of different things and living in fascinating places around the world as a young boy who was a TAC airlifter, and as the governor of Texas, to go promote the state and to compete against other states and literally compete against other nations. But this job as the Secretary of Energy is the coolest job I've ever had. And the reason it is that is because of these 17 national labs that we operate. I mean, the men and women, you all are unique. I hope all of you know how blessed you are to get to be doing what you're doing. The cutting edge of what you're doing in your lab. The potential to change people's lives, whether it's over in the advanced material side. I just met with the president of the university, and Wendy and I were talking about this great opportunity that Iowa State and the Ames Lab have, and partnering up and bringing the private sector in to have this troika, if you will, of opportunities to create these unique ways to impact people's lives. I'm just never, I'm never at an end of new stories to tell about what's going on in these national labs. And listen, I'll be the first to tell you, when I took as the governor of Texas, we were in 2012, I think it was. The Texas A&M University was one of the schools that was in the bid process for Sandia labs, and so that's when I really got my education about what the Department of Energy is involved with, and this broad array of places that it participates in, particularly dealing with the universities. And so I was very engaged in helping Texas A&M to be competitive when it came to the Sandia Labs. Now, subsequently, they didn't win that bid, but it got them in a position to be a competitor again for Los Alamos. And about a year ago, the Los Alamos, and they actually won that. But my point with me sharing that with you is the vast array of places and the different things that the labs do that we can even talk about in this room. Because there's so many things that the labs do in a classified setting that are incredibly fascinating. But it dawned on me early on in the process. The first opportunity that I had to go represent the United States in a rather substantial setting was in April of 2015. I think I'd been secretary for about a month. And there was a G7 meeting of energy secretaries, ministers in Rome. We had finished that meeting. I was on my way back. Had gotten on the aircraft. From time to time, somebody will recognize you, when you're walking along, and they'll do a double take, and they recognize you. I was sitting on the plane, this young man was walking by, and he took that second look. And I knew he recognized me. Now, I've had this interesting life. Been the agriculture commissioner of the state of Texas, which by and large, most of the people in Texas didn't know we had an agriculture commissioner, much less who it was. Been the governor of Texas for 14 years. I ran for president twice. I've been on Dancing with the Stars. I don't know which one of these it's going to be that this guy recognizes me from, right? But, go with it. And he said, Mr. Secretary, how are you? I work with you. And I said, well, that's cool. We're in Frankfurt, Germany, changing planes. And so we leveled off, and I went over and I said, so where do you work over here that you'll work with me? And the answer was stunning for me until I really understood a little deeper what all we're involved with. And his answer was Interpol. And his job is a researcher, and he tracks nuclear materials all around the Eastern European theater. His expertise as a nuclear physicist, in this case. And that was one of those aha moments for me, that this is a very different agency. That the work you do really affects people's lives. I share often that one of my favorite old quotes is that United States Marines don't have to get up every day and look in the mirror and wonder if they make a difference in people's lives. The same can be said for the employees of the Department of Energy. You don't have to get up in the morning and wonder if what I do really makes a difference. It does. And that is a great blessing, to be able to work in a place with people who have that extraordinary intellectual capability, with a mission that is so broad, with results that are really affecting people's lives. And the department we have, you think about all of these men and women who you work with. Just the number of R&D 100 awards that this lab has brought into. Okay, that's the end of the story. That's a cool way to say you're done, dude. And somebody's just leaning on the wall over there. It's kind of. And in conclusion, Adam, I guess that is a pretty good segue actually into. Adam's gonna. We're gonna do a little bit of a. We don't have a couple of chairs up here or a sofa for us to sit on to do that. But let's bring Adam. Thank you for. We're gonna do a little Q&A thing here. For I think you all have sent some
questions in.
Yeah.
We asked for questions, got some responses.
And I will. Great. And one of the things I learned over the years is that I get to decide whether I want to answer them or not.
You are the boss.
That's all cool. It's all good.
All right, let's start. Besides the appointment of Karen Evans, DOE assistant security and emergency response, what additional measures is DOE taking to protect the energy grid?
There's a number. The world is never static, and there's a number of areas of what you all do and what we are involved with. They're really fascinating. When you think about in the name, the Department of Energy, and where we find ourselves in the world today, from an energy standpoint, and even if you're thinking about fossil fuels, or a decade ago, in 2005, there was a guy giving a pretty good speech called Peak Oil, that we'd found all the fossil fuels, and even if we found any more, it was going to be exorbitantly expensive. And during that period of time, we were making some pretty substantial transitions. Like my home state, we decided that we were going to be a major competitor and a major investor in wind energy. What natural gas was $9 to $13 a MCF, and I mean the expense of that fuel. So we really looked at wind energy. I know I'm going to get to your question, Matt, but and Texas developed their own CREZ lines, and what we decided was, we've got these good places where the wind blows, but they're generally not where the population are. So we built the lines, and that helped subsidize the building of and so Texas became the #1 wind energy producing state in the nation, passing up California. They produce more wind than but 5 countries today. So their wind production, and that all occurred because of the snapshot in time we took at that time with the cost of the other competitive fuels. Well, the world changed. And through some technologies, interestingly, technology, Adam, that came from the national labs in one part of it, and that was hydraulic fracturing and directional drilling. And the DOE part of that was they came up with the adhesive that allowed the polycarbonate compound to stay on the drill bit, so that you could do this horizontal drilling. And so the world literally changed in a 5-year period of time to where this massive amount of liquefied natural gas now available through some formations that previously were not producible. And today, the United States is the #1 oil and gas producing country in the world. And at the same time, using that liquefied natural gas and moving away from older, inefficient power plants and some other things, obviously the wind side of it in particular, had allowed that state, which is, I know Terry Branstad and I used to have great competitions between each other. And he said, "You know who #2 in wind energy is?" I said, "Yes, sir. Iowa." But producing a lowering of emissions by 60% in NOx, 50% SOx, a total carbon footprint decrease, carbon dioxide footprint of almost 20%. And that's a state that grew by massive amounts during that period of time. And our lesson there is that you can have a positive impact on the environment, still continue to have jobs created, and what I call thoughtful energy policy. All of that happened in just the last decade. And 10 years ago, the idea that we were sitting around worrying about whether or not the lights are going to be on was generally not on your radar screen. Karen Evans was brought on board to create this office. The acronym is CSER, cybersecurity and recovery from an emergency event that would occur. And the potential for, I don't think just one event is probably going to cause the lights to go out. That's my observation. A gas pipeline going to the northeast singularly is not going to cause the lights to go out. A polar vortex coming down like we had in 2014 singularly is not going to cause the lights to go out in New York City, not for an extended period of time. But what I worry about is this scenario where you have a polar vortex that puts an incredible strain upon the grid, coupled with a physical attack on a gas pipeline, coupled with a virus that's been laid upon the control panels that's just waiting for that collective other events to occur. And at that particular point in time, I can foresee an event where a major city like New York, financial capital of the world, would go into darkness for multiple days. The chaos that gets created there. That's why we do what we do. It's why we stand up offices like Caesar and have Karen in there running those types of scenarios. It's why we have invested at Idaho National Lab with the grid, the test grid, where we can go out and actually break things, where we can put these types of viruses on the control panels, where we can break things. So after I got to be the secretary, ERCOT is the Electrical Reliability Council of Texas is a big private sector group that runs our, and Texas, 85% of Texas is just in one grid, and it's not hooked up to the national grid. So they're kind of a standalone. I asked them one day, I said, hey, would make sense if we could come in and do some tests on y'all, and they were just kind of like, I don't think so. Go break your own stuff. But we have this awesome potential to go test our grid. And we're really focused on this now. That's Karen's job. And the spin-offs, and there's a spin-off in practicality of almost everything that you do in some form or fashion. On this one, when we have major natural disasters like a hurricane, there are things that we learn about the grid, about how the resiliency of it, how you get it back up and going, that are going to pay great dividends. So I'm really excited about what we're doing. PNNL, Idaho, you all with some of the work that you're doing here on manufacturing materials. All of that has a role to play in the resiliency of our grid. So I promise you the next answer will be shorter.
An easy one.
Okay.
Ames Laboratory is defined as a single program Office of Science laboratory. However, energy efficiency and renewable energy has become a significant sponsor. Neither the director of the Office of Science or the Assistant Secretary have been confirmed. Are you able to discuss the current status and outlook for these confirmations?
No. Okay. Just kidding. It's Washington is different from operating a state. And, I don't want to go into I try to look for the bright side of stories rather than the dark side of stories. And the dark side of the stories is we're approaching 2 years since we've been there, and we don't have all of the people in place to operate the department. Now, the men and women who are there, who are operating those divisions, those parts of the agency, I've got great trust in. Would we like to have the full contingent in place? Yes, we would. Washington is Washington, and from time to time it doesn't work with the expedition that you might want it to. We've got really, the S2, the Office of Science, the Paul DeBar who's in there. We got some great and very capable men and women who are in running. We don't have a general counsel. Some would say, hey, one less lawyer to deal with. But the point is, Washington is slow from my perspective, but it does not hamstring us from the standpoint of being able to make good decisions and flow. And with that criticism, this fiscal year 19 budget for the first time in what, Brian? How many years that we aren't working with a CR that? Yeah. So there's the bright side. So don't focus on the dark side, Adam. Come on, man. It's all good.
We greatly appreciate having a budget.
Yep. Well, and one of the things that we talked about is having this relationship with the lab directors. One of the first meetings I had, because I recognized that where the rubber meets the road from my perspective, I mean, headquarters is up there and it's there for a reason, but where the real traction is at these national labs. And it's giving the directors and letting them know full well that we respect what they do, and we're not going to try to micromanage your labs at all. One of the first things we talked about was, what is it that we do at the Forrestal building that gets in your way? What are the rules and regulations that we put there that keep you from doing your job? And I asked them, I said, send that back in, because I said, government always, and I've been in it for 40 years now, government always, I think the vast majority of the time when they come up with a rule or a regulation, it has good intentions, but sometimes by the time it gets put into place and the reality and the actuality, it becomes a hindrance. The cost is more than the benefit. And so we tried to go through that process, and I asked the lab director, I said, when you see, and this, for right now, I'll ask you all to do the same thing with him. What is it that happens at this lab? What are the rules or the regulations? We were talking about travel and how you have to go through this long, laborious process of being able to get checked off on whatever's going on out there in your shop, that you say, take a look at this, director, because this may be more of a problem, this may be more of a hurdle than it actually is a benefit to the lab or to the employees or to the general public. And that's just good. I happen to think that's good management. And I know Adam will be open to your ideas. Are we okay? On time? One more.
We have time for one more question. You already discussed to some extent wind energy in Texas and Iowa. Iowa, I believe, has the highest percentage of its electricity.
That's correct. And Terry reminded me of that on a regular basis, and Kim will too. When I talk to her this afternoon, she will remind me of that.
Where does the Department of Energy? Where do you predict the most growth in wind energy in the country going forward? Onshore, offshore?
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I look at this from a global perspective. And I think some of the biggest growth is going to be international, and it's going to be international because of the work that we have done at some of our labs to make wind energy as affordable, as predictable as it is. So one of the things that we do is we travel. Is we take and promote U.S. innovation, U.S. technology offshore. So I think there's some real potential and growth with our. I think Sandia Lab is doing some work, and I'm talking about Sandia out on the West Coast, is doing some work on some of the rotor technologies, and what you all may be doing here on some of the material side to make our magnet. Excuse me. Thank you. Big word for an Aggie. More efficient, and so. But to specifically answer your question, I think the growth offshore has some great potential. Some of the floating technologies that do two things. Number one, not only do they produce electricity for use, but they also desal and be able to use the obviously the salt water and pumping in the water, because I mean these dual purpose projects that wind energy is going to be driving. So anyway, let me tell you again, thank you for doing what you do. You truly make a difference in this world that we live in, and I hope all of you, and I know you do, but I hope you get reminded often that you get to work in the coolest agency in federal government. The things that you do, the projects you get to work on, the effect you have on people's lives is nothing less than stunning. God bless you.
Thank you, Mayor.